If you are a successful and happy and fulfilled Black person with a positive self-regard and a modicum of self-reliance, you're not beneficial to the left. You're invisible, right? Because you can't be told, well, if you vote for us, we'll make sure the racists don't get you. I think people are waking up to the fact that that's a load of crap.
Welcome to the Unspeakable Podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. This week, I welcome returning guest Erec Smith. Erec is an academic whose area of scholarship is rhetoric, but he also does a lot of writing and talking about the state of race politics in America, the perils and uses of DEI, and he's just generally very good at offering a reality check on things while also being rigorous and very honest in his thinking. In this conversation, we talk about, among other things, the concept of prescriptive racism, which Erec wrote about in a recent Boston Globe column. We also discuss what's happened on college campuses since he was last here about a year ago, including the ouster of college presidents, including Harvard's Claudine Gay over free speech politics. We also discuss how the emergence of the concept of microaggressions have resulted mainly, and really perhaps more than anything, in people steering clear of one another. Erec will be a guest speaker at our first ever co-ed Unspeakeasy retreat in Chicago, June 4th and 5th. That is also true of my last two guests, Nadine Strawson and Lisa Selin-Davis. They will all be guest speakers. So to find out more about that, go to the unspeakeasy.com. In the meantime, please enjoy this conversation with Erec Smith. Erec Smith, welcome back to The Unspeakable.
Thanks for having me.
You were here in January of last year. We talked about a number of things, including the Elimination of Harmful Language initiative that had been released by Stanford at the end of 2022. I don't know if you recall that or if you've memory
I
hold
do.
Yeah, so that was the one that classified words like brave and guru as problematic. Field, we're not allowed to say field anymore. Yeah. So we had a lot of fun mocking that stuff. But the fact was that it was creeping into workplaces and HR policies. And you offered some practical advice about how to respond when people run into that kind of stuff in the workplace. So a year and change later, do you think the temperature has cooled at all on this kind of thing?
But the temperature has cooled only because the temperature in other places has gone up. Like the growing anti-Semitism on campuses these days, the protests, things like that. Things that happened post-October 7th. People are starting to realize how toxic this new contemporary DEI is. It's not an extension of what they think is the civil rights movement. It's something much more illiberal and divisive. So now that people are really seeing that up close and personal, I think the temperature on, let me put it this way. The power of the DEI movement has been alleviated to some degree. Can I say that?
Yeah. I mean, I think power might be a problematic word now that I hear you say it. Sorry. That's
agency.
You're not a racist.
Yeah.
Agency.
Yes. The influence of DEI has been lessened. Okay. Let's put it that way.
So, you've been here before. We know that you teach rhetorics at York College of Pennsylvania. I know you studied comparative literature before you went into rhetorics. I mean, let's just talk here for a little bit about the academic landscape. I mean, obviously, the curtain has been pulled back on a lot of the climate on campuses since October 7th. I think, Harvard was ranked somewhere, I think maybe by Fire, as like the university, the campus that had the worst free speech environment.
The worst, yes.
Yeah, anywhere. Okay. So, you're very much out in the world and you're writing publicly and you founded Free Black Thought and you're in our heterodox free speech space. But you also teach on a small campus. And it's not the kind of campus that gets a lot of attention compared to the Ivies. What is it like on those campuses with respect to these kinds of issues?
Frankly, I wouldn't know. I've taken an unpaid leave of absence to work for the Cato Institute. So,
Oh,
yes, I've been there for a while now, and that has, I mean, it's been great. It's been great mainly because an accurate job description is Eric, right? I'm being, that's my job. My job is being me and doing what I would do anyway, which is read and write and talk about these things. And it's nice that I'm getting paid for that, sure. The only downside to Cato is that people use it as an excuse to not listen to me.
right.
Oh, he's at Cato. That means he's a fill in the blank, right? Conservative, extreme right wing, or some other kind of inaccurate label for what this think tank is. So that's the only downside. But I mean, even that is fodder for an article, right?
Yeah. And what does one do at a think tank exactly?
Well, they think a lot. And with Cato, it's a lot about policy. So we're writing about policy, we're giving advice about policy and things like that. I am in the politics and society branch of Cato. So what I do, I write and research on civil discourse. I write and research on contemporary anti-racism, especially the kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion that's undergirded by critical social justice. Yeah, I write, I give talks all over the place, and I'm trying to put together events in which I can invite people to DC to have these conversations on DEI or civil discourse or both simultaneously, which is my favorite. So that's what I'm doing here.
So, when you say that you are writing and talking about policy, does that mean that you are actually trying to change policy? And what would that mean? Like actual legislation in government?
Well, policy is typical for Cato. I don't really do policy as much as everybody else does. In fact, I don't really do it at all. That being said, I do find myself on the Hill often, talking to congressmen and women about these issues. We have good conversations. They ask advice and opinions of me, and vice versa. So, in that sense, I'm influencing things. But as far as concrete policy is concerned, I have yet to do that.
Okay. So, like, what would be the kind of conversation you would have with congressperson, for instance?
The effects of DEI on college campuses. I testified before Congress last month on this, in which I identified critical social justice as the main culprit of what's going on. So congressmen and women want to understand what's going on. They see what's going on. They know it's not good, but they don't really know where it came from. They don't really know why it's so powerful. And they ask questions of me to get to the bottom of those things. Yes, critical social justice is the real culprit. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are wonderful words, but through the lens of critical social justice, they are not wonderful words.
Okay. And by critical social justice, are you talking about an academic framework or something that rose up literally through academia and like students are taught this and they internalize it and then they go out in the world and implement it? Like, what are we talking about exactly?
Yes, critical social justice is, I explain it as an umbrella term under which you get things like critical legal studies, critical race theory, things like that. The primary tenet, and this comes from Robin DiAngelo, who doesn't say DEI as much as she says anti-racism. Same thing though. The main tenet is this: the question isn't did something racist happen? It's how did it manifest in that situation? Which is to say, something racist is always already happening. An interaction between a black person and a white person is inherently racist. If you don't understand why, it's because you're not looking hard enough, right? Somehow, this conversation we're having right now is racist. Somehow, you're oppressing me, right?
Oh, for sure.
Um,
But that's
yes.
because I'm the host. So all my guests, that's why they come on.
So that's the general idea. So there's oppressor and oppressed, i.e., white people, non-white people. And the whole foundation, the whole structure of Western civilization is put together for the express purpose of maintaining white supremacy. And that is critical social justice in a nutshell.
Okay. Now, are there like different iterations of this set of concepts? Like, okay, so we're talking about this now, it's 2024. Was this the sort of thing that was like part of the, so-called Black Power movement in the 70s, or is it like really different?
That's a good question. I mean, there are some similarities, some overlaps, especially with the more extreme versions of the Black Power movement. But I would distinguish them. Mainly, I would distinguish them mainly because there was some logic and rationality behind Black Power movement, right? They had reasons, methods to their madness. Critical social justice doesn't think, it doesn't think critically. It abides by a narrative of oppressor versus oppressed. And again, with the tenet I just shared with you about racism always already happening, it's a very different creature from late 60s, early 70s Black Power movements.
Okay. All right. So I'm curious, like you grew up in I guess in the 70s and the 80s. I know you're
80s.
from 80s. Okay. I know you're from South Jersey. I'm from North Jersey. So, like, did you have a sense that interactions with anybody were like inherently racialized? Like, how aware were you, or was anybody around you for that matter, of these kinds of dynamics?
Oh, I was extremely aware of those dynamics. I was part of one of the few Black families in the neighborhood at the time. This is the 80s. So, the integration thing was just starting, really, right? And yeah, they reminded me on a regular basis that, I was one of the only Black families in the neighborhood. So I understood what racism was at a very early age.
Okay. So, what was that like?
It wasn't great. I just wrote an article for the Boston Globe about this, actually. It starts off with this anyway. Well, let me just put it this way. When I was growing up, obviously I was kind of a misfit because of my race, and there was a lot of racism from the students, from my peers and adults. And yeah, it wasn't a happy time for me at all. But upon graduating the eighth grade, I would go to a regional high school that was literally 50% Black, and I said to myself, okay, I'm escaping now. I'm going to find my people, like-minded people. I'm going to finally not feel like a misfit. I'm going to fit in. And then I get there, and it turns out that I don't fit in there either because I act too white, apparently. So I wasn't a real Black person. So I told the story in the article to illustrate what's called prescriptive racism, which is the idea that there is a set of behaviors and characteristics that you have to abide by if you are a particular race. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. You're inauthentic, right? You hear people call Black people Oreos or Uncle Toms or something like that because they're not abiding by the prescribed behaviors of Blackness in America, right? So I was getting that on both sides. I was getting that from white people who only liked me when I was like, playing basketball or dancing, literally.
Oh.
And the Black people who thought, well, I was too polite, I spoke too well, and things like that. And I told that story not to garner pity or anything like that. I'm not a big fan of victimhood. I told that story because both sets of bullies have not gone away. They're still here. They're just academic administrators, and they're editors of journals, right? They're activists. They're heads of HR departments. Things they're still here, and they're still doing that stuff, and they're getting away with it. In fact, they're running the show. So yeah, so I'm very used to what's going on here. In fact, when I was kind of demonized for speaking out against the idea that it was racist to expect Black kids to speak or write in standard English, that vitriol reminded me of something. I was like, this feeling is familiar. Oh yeah, it's how I felt throughout my whole childhood, based on two distinct sets of bullies, basically saying the same thing. You're not acting right, and we're going to punish you for it.
Well, so okay, but this is interesting because you're saying that the Black kids wanted you to act Black, but also the white kids wanted you to act Black. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
They liked it when you were dancing or playing basketball. So really, there was no reward system for acting white, and that goes a little bit against some of the narrative that you hear about, like, respectability politics
Yep.
and black. If you want to, there's a certain standard for social advancement, and it is white coded, and everybody should adhere to that.
Yeah, this is prescriptive racism as opposed to traditional racism, which is basically because you're a part of this particular race, then you are inherently inferior, I'm superior, whatever. That was there too. I want to say it was just prescriptive racism. That was there too. But the prescription really stood out because I find myself being accepted the more stereotypically black I was.
Wow. So, do you think there was ever a period where, see, this is so funny to me because I feel like I have noticed white kids really liking it when they had like black friends in their friend group, but those black kids acted pretty white. But maybe that was just my experience.
Well, okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was the Obama phenomenon to me. I mean, I really thought that part of the appeal of Obama, I mean, it was fanatical, fandom in some cases, was that he was like a black guy who was essentially like a white NPR listening, Volvo driving yuppie. And the white people loved it because they felt like he was one of them, but they also got credit for like knowing a black guy.
Yeah, I read an article once though, and the author, I forget who it was making the argument that you know he wouldn't have been accepted if he had a white wife. Yeah, because he would have been seen as somebody trying too hard to be white. And he had a black wife, so that means he was a real black person, but one that was palatable to white people, right? So all that stuff had to come together, and I found that very interesting. And it was a compelling argument, and I tell that now because you know a lot of people, and this I noticed this in graduate school. A lot of people think when it comes to having that black best friend that proves that you're not racist. Um, I didn't count. I didn't. Eric doesn't count. I need a blacker person, right?
Oh.
Yeah. I There are professors who wanted to work with me and then got to know me and then didn't want to work with me, right? Well, there was nothing in it for them, right?
Oh gosh.
There's not. I'm not helping this kid. This kid is he's quite comfortable in white spaces, right? I need the person who grew up in the ghetto who's angry at every white person. I have to help him. Then I get points. You
All
know?
right. Well, I guess this is like Roland Fryer being inconvenient. Somebody like Claudine Gay. Claudine Gay was until recently the president of Harvard. She was, I believe, on some kind of she was the dean of something and was instrumental in penalizing Roland Fryer, who is the black economist doing a lot of work at Harvard, saying that police shootings of unarmed black men are not nearly that doesn't happen nearly as often as people think. Anyway, people can look this up. This is many listeners are probably familiar with this, but yeah, I guess that would be an example of like somebody who's not black enough for Claudine Gay, who is certainly an elite
Yeah.
in her own right. Yeah. So I guess, right, a lot's happened since you were here last. I mean, what was it like for you? What were your thoughts in terms of that whole eruption last fall with Claudine Gay and the other Ivy League presidents who were called into account?
I think it's right that Claudine Gay and I believe the president of Penn, if I'm not mistaken, they both stepped down, right? I don't know if the other president stepped down. I think it was the right thing to do. Their inability to articulate themselves when it came to free speech and anti-Semitism. What's redder than a red flag? The reddest flag ever is what I saw waving during that hearing. And the plagiarism thing with Claudine Gay, it's unfortunate and it's sad to see. but her stepping down was the right thing to do. My issues, however, come from the attack on her and the nature of that attack. When she stepped down, people kept going. People kept, kicking her when she was down, right? Like I was like, okay, it's over. Let's move on. When you vanquish an army on the battlefield, you don't stay there and keep shooting the dead bodies. You move on, right? People weren't moving on; they're still kicking her. And what's more, when people look for other instances of plagiarism, they seem to be only looking at minority authors. And I know for a fact white people are plagiarists.
Right.
People. There are books out there that aren't theirs, or at least substantial parts of those books. But that wasn't the real focus. It was only on minorities, specifically Black authors. I was like, when that happened, I said to myself, okay, what is this really about? I was totally on your side when you wanted to have Claudine Gay step down because, well, she wasn't up to snuff to be a president at an Ivy League institution. I agreed with that. But the aftermath was concerning to me.
So you don't buy the argument that somebody like Claudine Gay would have been given a pass for plagiarism in a way that a white person wouldn't. What do you say to that kind of thing?
Oh, I get why people say that. Sure. I mean, it's in this day and age, if you say anything negative to a Black female academic in a leadership position, then you are seen as inherently racist, even if you're making a good point. So there are a lot of people out there who would give her a pass to kind of make up for the atrocities of the past or something like that, or to prove to the world that they are allies, that they're not racist, right? So yeah, there are she probably did get away with some things that a white person wouldn't have.
Yeah, there was a piece in, speaking of conservative think tanks, the AEI, their publication, the American Enterprise Institute, back in January by a guy named Frederick Hess, talking about how he had been in the a PhD program at Harvard with Claudine Gay and her now husband, who I think was this guy's roommate. And this is fascinating because he talked about how she was really not an ideologue at that time, and she was just kind of doing her work and interested in the stuff everyone else was interested in. Her husband is white, and she was not like into identity politics at all. And he really sort of highlights the degree to which this kind of track, it's opportunism more than anything else. Like, and you really start to wonder, like, how many of these people in these positions actually believe this stuff, or did they always believe this stuff, or is it just kind of the best lever to pull if you want to get ahead?
I mean, I'm not going to say opportunism doesn't exist in identity politics and anti-racist initiatives and things like that. I mean, it's DEI is a lucrative business, right? So it attracts people who like money, and so the opportunism is definitely there. That being said, I don't know if Claudine Gay is an opportunist. I mean, people change, right? I mean, maybe she was one person in college and life changed her into somebody else. Who knows? I'm not the same person I was, when I was an undergrad. I'm not super different either, but I'm not the same person. So I don't know if it's opportunism. I don't know if it's just a organic change of ideology. I don't know.
What kind of person were you in undergrad?
What kind of person? I was a lot more optimistic about life and people and principles and things like that. Like college Eric would not believe what was going on right now, right? College Eric would not believe that free speech and equality and individualism and self-reliance were bad things. College Eric walked around with a copy of Emerson's Self-Reliance because he loved it so much,
Yeah, I heard this about you.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he'd be very disappointed. I mean, I guess everybody would be, or many people would be anyway. But yes, his hopes of the future did not turn out the way he wanted them to.
Yeah, it was Emerson and Frederick Douglass for you, right? Those were your two
Yes.
big touchstones.
And Du Bois.
Yeah.
And Du Bois. And Du Bois, who is a bad guy to a lot of people because of his, socialist leanings. But he was a very nuanced person, right? He was a very strong person. He was the first person to get a PhD from Harvard as a black man. He wrote about being a student in undergrad at Harvard in the late 1800s, and he went through that school with such confidence that it really makes people who complain about racism today look childish, right? If he could do that, then you're fine, right? In
Right. Well,
2024, yeah.
yeah. I mean, pretty much any given civil rights movement makes people who complain about that thing today look foolish. I can't.
Yeah, I agree.
So were you, I think you went to Ursinus College, right? In Pennsylvania. And
Yeah.
yeah, small liberal arts college. And I guess this would have been in the 90s or late 90s.
Hmm.
So what was the climate like then? Like what was the student makeup? Like how were people talking about race at that point?
Um, like my childhood, I was one of the few black students there. It was, very white, I guess I can say. And, people didn't, racism was talked about, but people didn't want to talk about it. It was a sweeping under the rug kind of thing. The school tried to have like a common theme my freshman year, unity and diversity, right? So we're talking about being unified as different people, right? Which is something that I miss these days because it's not unity and diversity, it's division and diversity.
I know exactly. I can't remember the last time I heard the
Nowadays.
word unity imposed upon anything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the theme, but it I don't think it took very much. And I want to say this: it's not like things are perfect today, even, right? What I realized as an undergrad was that what I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna succeed, and other people's opinions don't matter to me. You know, if somebody is racist, that's his problem. If he thinks I'm inferior because of my skin color, that's his problem. Clearly, I'm not, and I'm going to go live my life and have that life showcase my I won't say superiority, my lack of inferiority. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
And so I realized there in college that okay, yeah, fine, I'm black, but like I'm on dean's list every semester. You know, I play football, I act, right? In theater, things like that. I write for the literary magazine. I'm killing it, basically. So, any idea that I could be inferior is absurd, and that's how I live my life. And that kind of sentiment is no longer cool with black people. That kind of sentiment is me being naive and duped by white supremacy culture, right?
Right. Okay. And I really want to like zero in on when this shift happened and like, again, like what was causing it? Was it just this influx of people that had, kind of taken all these courses and, this kind of stuff had just gotten baked into the point where it was everywhere? Like, can you think of like the year that things started to feel different? Like, how do we track this?
Greg Lukianoff and I think Ricky Schlott just published a book called The Canceling of the American Mind.
Yeah.
And they say this stuff was rampant in the 90s, and then it kind of went underground around the late 90s, right? And it was still there, but it was just smoldering, right? And then the events of the teens happened, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and obviously George Floyd, what happened in 2020. And that was the catalyst that had these ideas reemerge, but reemerge with a vengeance, right? As if that whole time they went underground, they were shooting up on steroids or something like that, and then they
Yes.
came out.
Yes.
Yes, and here they are. They're waiting for their window of opportunity, their kairotic moment, And I tend to agree with that. As an undergrad, I saw a little bit of it, but then, as the book says, it went underground and popped up again around 10, 11 years ago. So it makes sense to me. Their timeline makes sense. And I think, you know, the internet, I think the ability to record things with this machine in our pockets, all those things came together to create the monster that is contemporary DEI.
Yeah, I guess that's an obvious and huge point, is that suddenly you could just record any interaction and then post it out of context and it would go viral. We've talked about this. Monica Harris, who's the executive director of FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and,
Yeah,
and Racism. And I think you were affiliated with FAIR. I don't know if you still are.
I was.
She came and spoke at on Speakeasy retreat last weekend here in LA. And I mean, we talked about a number of things, but one of the things that I sort of mentioned a little bit, and it really just disturbs me, and I even have a hard time talking about it, is the way that this kind of stuff has created a situation where white people, I'm just going to say this, this is a really hard thing to say. White people are afraid of Black people, not in a like, I'm going to get, mugged on the street kind of way, but in a like any given interaction.
Yeah.
I think white people are like, I'm going to insult this person. I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to look at like any number of things. And it is so, I'm sorry, it is so fucked up. And it makes it everybody. I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine as a Black person what it must be like to, like, any given interaction with like a nice white liberal person. The white person must have like this look of fear in their eyes. I mean, do you
Yeah,
notice this?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's one of the things I cite as kind of like a warning for all these DEI initiatives. You're just going to stifle conversation. Period. I mean, the concept of microaggressions alone,
Right.
right? I mean, you and that concept of microaggressions combined with the general tenets of critical social justice. I mean, everything's racist, right?
Right.
I mean, if you ask somebody what time it is, you know, they're going to be like, "Are you testing my ability to tell time? Is it because I'm Black?"
Oh, I thought because time is a white supremacy concept, though.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, that's a good
That
one.
too. It's a
I'm going
double
to use that.
microaggression.
Yes,
Yeah.
double microaggression. Yeah, so I mean, it's something. Anything can be racist now. So why chance it, right? Why risk it? I'm just going to not talk to that person. I'm just going to not have Black friends,
Yeah.
right? So it's making things worse.
Yeah. I mean, so I had an incident. I don't want to be too specific about the details, but this was in 2017, so kind of a while ago now. I was in a supermarket. It was in a small town in the Midwest, college town, very liberal college in this town, but small town. I was in the supermarket. It was middle of winter. It was really cold. Everybody was wearing very big, heavy parkas, and I had my shopping cart, and I bumped into this woman just slightly, like I bumped her with my shopping cart or something. It was just like any day, just totally innocuous kind of thing. And I said, "Oh, sorry, excuse me," or something. And she turns to me and she turns around and she goes, "Oh, you're sorry? Excuse me?" And she was a middle-aged Black woman, dreadlocks, I don't know, also wearing a very heavy parka. It's really cold out. And this bizarre encounter just took place. It was like, I was like, "Oh, no." I said, I'm sorry. No, I really didn't see you." And she goes, "You didn't see me because I'm invisible to you. That's why you didn't see me." And it was so strange. And it turned out that this woman was the head of the, are you ready for this? She was the head of the African American Studies department in this small college. And obviously she was just programmed to see every interaction this way. And it was fascinating and horrifying and depressing. And I never forgot it. And it's not like I, completely obsess about this when I go to the supermarket, but like I am very aware. Like if I'm in the supermarket and I am approaching the checkout line, and that thing where there's like somebody coming from the other direction, and like it's not clear like who was first, who was ahead of who.
Uh-huh.
I almost always wave the person through, like, no matter what. But if they are Black, you better believe I am stepping back. And it is
Yeah.
terrible.
It is terrible. And the woman you had that interaction with, I mean, is probably steeped in critical social justice ideology because, well, any interaction between her and a person and a white person is going to be somehow racist. So anybody else, that would have been a legitimate sorry, and a legitimate accident, but you did it, so you weren't seeing her because she's Black, right? The mind reading that happens as well. You want to laugh? Look at the comment section in the Boston Globe for my article, in which people just decide they know exactly who I am and they tell me who I am, right? Based on this article that I wrote. And I'm like, how could you possibly know that about me?
Ugh.
I mean, there's this idea. So if I'm a Black person who's saying these things, I must hate myself. I must hate my Blackness. I must be uncomfortable with being Black. I must want to be white or something like that. And it goes straight to that conclusion because that's the narrative in which they're thinking. There's no critical thought going on whatsoever. There's no impartial or objective approach to what's being written. I'm plugged into a ready-made narrative, right? And they go from there.
Do you think these are mostly white people or is it mixed?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah. So when you try to talk to people about this stuff, are you talking, I mean, we know you're talking to lawmakers, but are you in situations where you're talking to people who are like DEI trainers or academics who study this stuff and are steeped in it? Like, are you ever in conversations where you are actually having an exchange about this, or is it mostly like writing and speaking and then looking at comments later?
Writing and speaking and looking at comments later. Sometimes when I give a talk, I there'll be somebody in the audience. Every time I give a talk, at least one person accuses me of lying. Um, but
Lying,
black
not
or
just
black or white,
lying.
yeah,
Okay.
lying. The stuff I'm talking about isn't happening, right?
Oh.
When I'm like, okay, I can show you video, I can show you emails, you know, but yeah, I'm not believed. The last talk I gave, the head of the English department, if I'm not mistaken, his question and answer segment was all about the fact that I jokingly called my field of rhetoric and composition woke studies, right? So, so that's all he talked about, right? It's the fact that I called it woke studies, and that I critiqued this conference that I went to earlier, and things like that. And I'm like, okay, do you have anything to say about the other 82 minutes and 55 seconds of my 83-minute presentation?
Mm.
Or are you just going to focus on the joke I told, right? I mean, it's when they do talk to me, it's about superficial stuff like that, right? Or they're accusing me of lying, right? It's either nitpicking on something that was totally insignificant to the argument I was making, or I'm just lying because I'm trying to impress white people.
Okay, I want to ask you what you think about increasingly we are hearing like anytime there's a critique of any sort of organization or corporation, whether it be NPR or Boeing, let's just say, DEI is now slipping into the conversation. So it's not, the NPR example, I think it's obvious. We just had that, piece in the Free Press by Yuri Berliner, who was a news
Yeah.
editor, talking about, just how I mean, the joke is that you can't turn on NPR for more than 5 seconds without a race, reference coming up. Talking about the climate there. Something like Boeing, they've had a lot of trouble, safety issues, incidents happening on planes. And, it's very quickly turns into, well, this is what happens after 10 years of DEI initiatives, affirmative action hiring for engineers and mechanics and people who don't know what they're doing. So therefore, the standards are going to be lessened and planes are going to start falling out of the sky. What do we do with that?
What do we do? Well, we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, racists are still out there. There actually are racists, And there actually are people who are going to spin this towards their racist ends, things like that. But that is very unfair to the Black people, non-white people who do know what they're doing, right?
Right.
Yeah, who are competent, if not excellent, in their fields, in their industries, right? It totally renders them invisible, and I think that's a problem. I understand the disappointment in the whole concept of affirmative action and things like that. Quota systems, I'll say.
Right.
I get the disappointment in that. I get the frustration in that. And there are some people there who have no business being there, right? But to lump everybody together, I think is a mistake. And I think a lot of people who do that, who do lump people together, are doing it on purpose. They know it will work. They know it will go a long way in delegitimizing people of color, right? But that being said, we do have people in positions they don't belong in, right? Because of these quota systems. It happens.
Okay. I mean, how big of a problem do you think it is, though? I mean, how do we even assess it? Or you probably don't know. I mean, you don't work
I
with
don't. I
Claudine,
don't
but
know.
yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea.
So the first time you were here, we talked about Christopher Rufo because we were talking about critical race theory sort of being introduced to the Trump White House and others. In the last few weeks, we've had Christopher Rufo making a spectacle out of Catherine Marr, who's the CEO of NPR, and she's a pretty white blonde lady who has a history of absolutely, this is like this could be in The Onion if back when The Onion was funny.
Yeah.
Tweets about inclusivity and just like the absolute most parody of woke sort of stuff. I think it's funny and I've been amused by it. I also think we're at overkill at this point, but mostly I really wish that it wasn't Christopher Rufo who was bringing this before us. What do you think?
I get what you're saying about wishing it wasn't Christopher Rufo. Because of the reputation he's made for himself, because he's cited often saying that his purpose is to demonize critical race theory and anything that has to do with it. So sometimes I think, and I know Chris Rufo. I'm not trying to talk badly about him or anything like that. But sometimes I think my job would be easier if he just like took a vacation. If he just like took like 6 months off. Just relax, Chris. Just go to a place to relax, and we can make progress on this culture war thing. And because I think whenever another thing, that goes along with people citing where I work as a reason to not believe me or anything like that. Citing Chris Rufo when I talk about anti DEI things, right? As if you don't have valid reasons to be against contemporary DEI. They'll just say, "Oh, well, you know that Christopher Rufo is doing this especially as a right-wing conspiracy to rid education and corporate America of any kind of diversity initiative." Right? And I'm like, well, I'm not. Yell at him. I'm not. I'm not Christopher Rufo. I have valid reasons for what I'm doing, and I can share them with you right now. But that doesn't matter because when they hear anti DEI, they think of him, and anybody else who's anti DEI is somebody who must agree wholeheartedly with everything he does.
Right. This is the guilt by adjacency.
Yes.
Yeah, this is really frustrating because it's always the people who are the loudest are the least nuanced, I guess, by definition. So are you saying you know him? Are you friendly with him? Like what's his deal?
What's his deal? I mean, I haven't seen the guy in a few years. So I don't really know what his deal is. When I spoke to him, last I spoke to him, he seemed very sincere, right? We were on the same page regarding what we didn't like about, at the time, being called CRT, although I said CRT is a little more nuanced than what it's being described as. I don't think he heard me, or he heard me and didn't care. But he's sincere. He was sincere to me. He thought this was illiberal, divisive, and something that was toxic and had to go. And I agreed wholeheartedly with that. So the Chris Rufo I encountered is is principled. He has some integrity, and he wants to make the world a better place. But TV Christopher Rufo is somebody the left sees as the devil incarnate.
Right.
And and given the footage they see of him in writing or in video, that's an understandable assessment.
But do you think it's possible to gain traction with this stuff without being that way? Because this is the problem with like this whole Substack economy, and just it's like nuance does not catch eyeballs, and therefore it does not pay the bills. I mean, and you've been very, you're a great example. That's why I keep having you back on the show. You're very disciplined in your thinking, and you don't take, you don't get didactic, and you don't sink to the level of a lot of the loudest people. But, you know, you're you're also, you're not making millions, and you're not a household name. So, like, how do you sort of just deal with that?
I pretend I'm a household name. That's how I deal with it.
Really, you fake it till you
No,
make it.
no, I'm just kidding. I think. Well, I mean, I have to stay true to who I am. I'm an academic first and foremost, although I'm not teaching at the moment. And I'm dedicated to saying things as fairly as possible and as nuanced as possible within the confines of a genre, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do in a 750 word op-ed,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I'm limited by stuff like that. I mean, I can't, write an academic book that only 6 people will read anymore. I got to write something that a larger audience will take in. So that's different. But ultimately, I'm trying to be fair and nuanced and clear, right, about what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. I think this fight is better coming out of a person of color because of the how anti DEI is heard as anti-black, right? So like people like me, John McWhorter, Coleman Hughes, those people actually are famous. They need to be the voices that are being focused on and not the Rufos of the world, right? And even if you call those guys and me like people who hate being black or whatever, right? You still have to listen to what we're saying, right? It doesn't matter that I work for Cato. What do you think of my words, my argument, right? The logic behind my conclusions and things like that. That's there. Look at that, right? And your ad hominem attacks on my motivations and things like that don't matter anymore. I think it would be better. Again, I'm not trying to badmouth Chris Rufo, but you know, I feel like we need to be louder than he is somehow without being cartoonish about it, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I write as much as I can. I talk as much as I can. We'll see what happens.
Well, what do you think of the fact that the New York Times, in their write-up of Coleman Hughes, it was a long piece. He's got a new book out about colorblind. His first book. The headline of the New York Times article is "The Young Black Conservative Who Grew Up With and Rejects DEI."
Yeah.
Coleman's not a conservative.
Yeah, I know. But he's called a conservative because he's anti-DEI. Like anybody who doesn't like it is considered a conservative, even if you're a lifelong liberal, right? I'm not conservative, right? I don't identify as that anyway, but anybody you ask will say, oh yeah, Erec Smith, definitely conservative, right? I don't identify like that. Now, maybe given the new definitions, if they are sinking into society, then maybe now I am a conservative. Maybe people who were liberals 15 years ago are now conservatives. I don't know. If that's the case, then I guess I am. But I haven't changed. Everything I say and do is stuff I would have said and done 15 years ago. And then I was being called a bleeding heart liberal. So I don't know what's going on here, but anybody, and this is not just black people who are against anti-DEI, obviously as white people too, or any kind of color. If you're against it, if you're not 100% on board with critical social justice, you are labeled a conservative, period.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I'm starting to think maybe I should just stop resisting the label. I mean, I do have sort of a conservative personality, and I think that might factor into some of this. Like, I don't like performative stuff. I don't know how you would define a conservative personality exactly. Maybe we just, as we all get older, maybe our personalities get a little more staid. But I don't know. Do you think you have a conservative personality?
Um, I wouldn't say so. I think when I hear that term, conservative personality, I think about somebody who is, I don't know, not closed minded, but not super open to new ways of doing things. They have their traditions, their ways of doing things that's comfortable and familiar to them, and that's that. I'm somebody like I'm open for whatever, you know. I'm always up for a challenge or an adventure or something like that, or a new way of looking at things. And if it makes sense to me, maybe I'll adopt it. You know,
Right.
um,
Right.
yeah, and that's
Okay.
that to me is the opposite of quote unquote conservative personality.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I guess I have to fine tune this a little bit. Maybe I'm just
Yeah.
thinking not having like a bunch of tattoos or something. I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking of. Okay. Do you have any tattoos? No, you don't
I know.
answer.
I know Republicans with tattoos, man. You know, it's
I know. Well, that's the thing is like the people on the right probably have more tattoos per square inch of skin than people on the left at this point. Well, before I let you go, I do want to ask about the upcoming election. We are getting polling numbers showing that like more and more Black people are saying that they're going to vote for Trump. I mean, there was a poll pretty recently showing that if the elections were held today, 17% of Black voters would vote for Trump. 20% said they would vote for someone other than Trump or Biden. 17% is not a huge number, but in 2016, Trump only got 8% of the Black vote. And the fact is that a lot of people who vote for Trump won't admit it to pollsters.
yeah.
So the number's probably a lot higher.
Yep.
What do you make of that?
The Democratic Party doesn't like me. It's because I'm not embracing this whole victim thing. I'm not looking at the world as this hopeless place from which I need to be saved by Democrats. If you are a successful and happy and fulfilled Black person with a positive self-regard and a modicum of self-reliance, you're not beneficial to the left. You're invisible, right? Because you can't be told, well, if you vote for us, we'll make sure the racists don't get you. I think people are waking up to the fact that that's a load of crap. And they're waking up to the fact that being self-reliant and successful is something that is in their grasp, right? It's something they can accomplish. And they don't need a helping hand in the form of a presidential administration. And they don't really see the Biden administration doing anything, period. There's no like strong change that has helped the Black community or whatever. So, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, voting Democrat over and over again, where has that gotten people? I don't think most people would say very far.
Do you think Trump is a racist?
I don't know the man. So I know that he may say things that he thinks his base wants to hear. I know that. We both grew up in New Jersey. I remember Trump being in the news every other day,
Yeah.
as a kid, and it wasn't for anything good.
No, exactly. Not in a good way.
Here's how Trump was a schmuck today. That was the news in my childhood. If you would have told like 10-year-old Eric that dude was going to be president, he would have laughed in your face. And here he is. So, I mean, I think the guy's just an ass, but I don't know if he's a racist. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel the same way when they ask me, like, do you think, oh, Trump is such a sexist? I don't think he's a sexist. I think he's a womanizer. Like, those are two different things.
Yeah, those are two different. Yeah, they're two different
Um,
things.
so, yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, and I remember, George W. Bush, I remember him talking, I think it was his biography or something. He said the how he was just absolutely devastated when, I guess, was it Kanye West who said he hates black people or something like this?
Yeah.
And I don't think George W. Bush was racist either. I mean, he was very close with Condoleezza Rice, whatever you make of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't saying that in any kind of leading way. But I don't know. Yeah, this whole idea of like, who's a racist? I mean, everybody's racist, right? Everybody's sexist, everybody's racist, everybody's ableist, everybody's something-ist all the time, because we're constantly taking in information and processing it and making judgments in a split second.
I'm perfect.
I know.
I'm none of those things.
You're a little racist. Come on. Remember
Not at
Avenue
all,
Q?
no.
Remember Avenue Q, the musical?
Yeah, everybody's a little bit. Yeah. I remember
Yes,
that.
everyone's a little bit racist, and it was a great song. It was about how everybody, there's little racism here and there, and that's just that. But that's what makes us human, and the idea is to, get past it. That musical won the Tony Award
Yeah.
in 2003 for, I believe, for
Yeah, I
best
remember.
musical. Can you imagine now?
No, I cannot. A lot of things that happened just a few short years ago would never happen now. Things have changed.
Yeah. Well, maybe as part of your Cato work, you could write a new musical, like an Avenue Q, bring back a revival of Avenue Q.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Cato, this libertarian think tank would love a musical involving puppets talking about
Look, don't joke. Don't be
irreverent things.
be
Okay.
be open-minded. I don't know. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I think that would be good. All right. Well, thank you as always for coming on the show. We should say that you are going to be a featured guest speaker at our first ever co-ed Unspeakeasy retreat in June in Chicago. I know you have no idea what an Unspeakeasy retreat is, because most people don't. It's very hard to explain, but you will know all about it once you do it. These are small, off the record, 2 days of discussion about all kinds of things, and we bring in guest speakers, and Nadine Strassen and Lisa Sellen Davis, and you are going to be featured guest speakers, and it's just a way for people are going to be able to interact with you and ask questions. It's very conversational. It does not need to be. It's not an 80-minute PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, good.
No preparation is required.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna be in conversation with you, but people should apply if they want to come. I think you're going to be with us on one of those days. I think June 5th. So anyway,
Yes.
but I'm a real fan of yours, and I always love having you on. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
That was my conversation with Erec Smith. He is a professor of rhetoric at York College of Pennsylvania, a co-founder and an editor at Free Black Thought, and a research scholar at the Cato Institute. Erec will be among our guest speakers at the first ever co-ed Unspeakeasy retreat in Chicago, June 4th and 5th. To find out more, go to theunspeakeasy.com. In the meantime, please enjoy a taste of this number from the massive hit musical Avenue Q, winner of 3 Tony Awards in 2004. Probably not coming to a high school drama club near you. I'll be back next week. See you then.